how flexible is your racket?
So how flexible or how stiff is your racket? Well, this racket, for example, has a 66 RA rating. Now, it's important to know that the RA rating generally falls between 50 and 70. And the higher the rating, the stiffer the racket, the lower rating, the more flexible the racket. Now, flexibility in the racket, best way to explain it is how much the racket is actually going to bend on impact. So a flexible racket is going to bend more than a stiff racket. And a flexible racket is going to absorb more of the shock, but give less power to the ball. Because what's going to happen is, as you hit the ball, the racket's going to bend, and the ball's actually going to leave the racket before the racket gets back to its initial position. So a flexible racket is going to absorb the weight, the ball's going to leave the racket before it comes back. So you're going to have better feel, less impact on your arm, but the ball's going to have less power than a stiff racket, which is going to stay more, and it's just going to destitute a lot more power to the ball. So comparing a stiffer racket to a more flexible racket, the stiffer racket is going to give you more power, but also transfer more impact to your arm. Whereas the more flexible racket is going to absorb more of that impact, so much better for your arm, but it's also going to take away some of that power. So why should you choose a stiff racket versus a flexible racket? Well, if you want your racket to give you power, I would suggest you choose a more stiff racket. If you want your racket to provide more comfort, but at the cost of power, then you should choose a more flexible racket.